nu sla ik hem op deze computer. Even kijken. Het zal niet toch zijn dat ik te weinig ruimte heb en dat hij ergens halverwege zegt. Eigenschappen. 6 gigabyte. En 7,5 gigabyte. Nou, dat moet wel lukken.
Okay.
Top.
So, you mind if we talk in English?
No problem. We'll switch to English.
Okay, great. So, Marnix, thank you for being open to my invite to do this interview.
Sure,
I remember I met you when I went to Nargis for an interview, and then I saw you, and then we went to an ecstatic dance together. And funnily, you had a training next day, the Kundalini energy training.
Right.
And
yeah. So that's an interesting coincidence. Coincidence how these things. This was now in December, I think. Last year, yeah.
And I just did one in April.
Yeah, at the same school, right? I heard. Yeah.
So it's funny how I remember, because I almost also went to that one that you went, but I didn't. Yeah. And yeah, it's funny. So there's a lot of things we can go into or start. But firstly, if you now turn around and if you see your whole life, right? And if you see that your life is like, there are different phases in your life, can you maybe give an overview of what phases you went through to get to here?
It's funny, you can look at like different kind of things, but it was not too long ago that I talked with my mother about how my life kind of evolved, and she said you were always a very happy child, and that subject came to mind because someone asked me, like, have you always been this joyous in life? And it's clearly not the case. For many decades I was like actually a lot in my head and far from happy. But I talked with my mom about this. She said, well, actually, as a child, you were always joyous, like radiant and beaming all the time. But then, well, life happened. She said, well, I'm glad to see that after 2.5, 3 decades, it's finally back. So yeah, I think these are kind of 3 steps processes that we go through. You first have something, then you lose it, then you regain it with a new clarity, a new wisdom. I have a very technical background, so I'm like a real geek engineer. I love all the technical stuff, latest technologies. And at the same time, after studying in Delft engineering, I kind of felt that I lost myself there a bit. I was the center of gravity really went way up into the head, and it took quite some years to get it down into the heart. The kind of basic things I feel in there that are very important is sensitivity and emotionality. So often when people speak about I'm sensitive, they almost use it like a synonym to emotional. But these are, in my opinion, totally different things. So sensitive would be your ability to distinguish, okay, this is colder and this is more warm, or this is more loud and less loud. So your discrimination ability between one another. And your emotionality is actually not linked to your sensitivity, but it's far more, how does the outside world affect your emotional state? Now, as a young child, I was both sensitive and emotional. So certain smells, for instance, in the car, I would like get nauseous, or I'd walk on the street and a certain smell would like come in so strongly. And nowadays we talk a lot about HSP, like people are highly sensitive people. And I wouldn't say maybe to a certain extent they are sensitive, but it's not so much the sensitive part, it's the emotional part. Because you can be sensitive and not get overtaken by it. And then it's not a problem. So for me, I was sensitive and emotional, and then over time I learned to suppress it because it was painful, like we all do, I guess. And then later on, as awareness grew, I was able to allow for the sensitivity to be there, but not be taken over by it. So then you can be both sensitive, and you can allow for the emotions to be there, but they aren't flooding you with all sorts of states that seem to take you over.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's actually a nice way to look how I evolved on different levels in my life. Right? From being a shy introverted, quite tense, stressed up person, to letting it go, and now integrating, diving really back fully into life without this fear of, yeah, before it hurt me and I don't want to touch it anymore. No, it's more embodied now.
So where are you right now?
Always here.
So yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Now, where am I right now? It's funny, I always had plans in my life, what it is I want to do and achieve. And nowadays, when even the thought of a plan comes up, there's almost like, sometimes I actually hear it as like laughter from the inside. And it's like, why would you want to come up with these petty little ideas when there's so much more that life can give you? Don't clog the system. Don't put unnecessary hurdles in the way because you think, oh, I'll need that for my happiness. Because truth is, nowadays, I so many times have the thought coming up in mind, what more could I want than this? And I can't come up with anything that would make me more happy in this moment than simply being. It is quite a liberating way to live.
So what are you going through now or experiencing?
In this instant?
Yeah, so in this phase of your life where what you just described is you have that awareness that, oh, that voice is not necessarily the true voice, or it doesn't have any validity. Like, what are you then going through or experiencing? Are you just, yeah.
No, so I love this, again, a trilogy. From something to nothing to everything. So we start out in life, or probably at age 2 years old or something, this concept of self starts to form. You're something, I'm this, and it's the outside world. And then at a certain time, for some people, the longing comes to get away from this, because we've tried and tried and we strive to become better and achieve more and become happier, and we find it doesn't really work, or only for a short while, then it falls again, and there's this another need. So then the path that I took was the path of Jnana Yoga, so wisdom, Vedantic, Advaita Vedanta, becoming aware of that which is behind everything. I am the observer. And once you're quite established in that, you could say that's the second phase, nothing. So you're something, and then you're nothing. And I'm glad that in this situation, in this perspective, the person didn't stop there. There was a longing to dive back into the world again. And once that starts to happen, which is more the tantric path, diving into life completely and embracing everything that is, it is seen that there's no difference between whatever arises and that what seems to be observing it. Because that what seems to be observing it, the nothingness, it's still duality. It's a nothingness versus that in which everything happens and that in that which observes it all. And once the realization dawned that there's actually no distinction, that it's all just one beautiful dance of life, then actually the third stage of everything, I'm everything, is starting to be embodied.
So, when you said about the second stage where you sense, oh, I'm observing or I'm witnessing, and the thoughts are happening, the emotions are happening, people are happening, everything's happening inside and outside, but I am not that. So there is still this sense of I am not that, but I am this intangible thing. And this embodiment of this intangible thing, how does that is it like a one moment where it just everything that just drops away, or is it something that's gradually integrated or seen through, or how does that
it's different for different people. For me it was, but then it fell away again, back, and then so for me, I had experienced, this was now already 7 years ago, I did a 10-day Vipassana retreat. And it was after I had tagged off all the boxes that life tells you, okay, that's what you need in order to be happy. So I had this beautiful girlfriend, beautiful relationship, beautiful house, nice job, money, healthy, traveling for work. I mean, come on. What else would you want, right? And I realized, walking past the mirror, I was like, I'm simply not happy. I look pissed off. So that's the first real strong sign where things just started to crumble down afterwards. The relationship broke up, moved out of the house, and all sorts of things happened. A good friend of mine said, well, you should do a 10-day Vipassana retreat. So that's 10 days of silence, 10 hours of meditation per day. You're not looking at other people. You're completely focused on sensing whatever is going through the system, the body, the mind, observing it, observing it, observing it. And for 4 days straight, I heard my own voice saying, you should go home, man, and meditate for 2 hours and work 10 hours. At least then you'll get something done. And there was like a split in my psyche where it was so clear that this is completely dysfunctional. And it's not just my voice, but the voice of the society, because everyone around is busy doing stuff. And if you would say, well, I'm actually not doing all that much, then you're like seen as a leech to society. It's like, come on, we have to do stuff. So I thought, no, if I follow this voice, I'm a slave to it for the rest of my life. So I decided to kind of continue the same process of the Vipassana, but then at home, and literally sit on my couch for 2 weeks and have my phone just out of hand's reach. And whenever I felt the need to grab for my phone, I would stop and say, okay, what am I trying not to feel? And then I could sometimes pinpoint it, or sometimes it would be just fake, a general sense of unease, like discomfort. And I'm looking for this dopamine hit to get rid of it. And those 2 weeks, I lived next to the park here in Rotterdam. The weather was pretty nice. So I thought, well, I might as well just sit on the couch or on a bench in the park, or start walking around, and also maybe around in the city. And those 2 weeks turned into well over a year where I did nothing other than that. Simply allowing for this constant unease, this unrest in me that said that I have to do stuff to drop away. And that year was accompanied with bizarre synchronicities, incredibly beautiful states where I could just look at a leaf and have tears flowing from my face. The so much beauty, so much bliss. But there were certain moments, and that's really what you're pointing at, where and I think to a certain extent everyone knows this, you have this contraction in your system which gives rise to I'm here and this is the outside world, and it can be stronger or lighter. So if someone threatens you, it comes like really strong into the chest or in the head or in the belly. It's different for a person. And if you're maybe in love, or you're looking at a beautiful painting, listening to beautiful music, sunsets, it kind of opens up, it relaxes. When you have beautiful sex, then at the moment of true connection, and probably also at orgasm, there's this opening up, right? There's this blending, merging. So the boundaries kind of drop away. And I had a lot of moments, and I've had them ever since, sometimes for a few seconds, sometimes lasting really long times, maybe like 40 minutes or so, where this contraction, it didn't release and become more open. It just completely vanished, totally. And in those instances, life just continued on in the same way, but it was absolutely clear that there's no future, there's no past, that there's no distance, that even the concept of I am makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. There's simply, the only thing I could describe is there's simply this one beautiful dance of being, one expression of life. And those moments, they really started to break down the concept of self, that what I have been holding on to for decades. And letting go of that made it more and more lighter to live, you could say. But still seeking remained. And it was because those instances where that center fell away, I still held on to it a bit more, like a little bit, like those are better than the moments when the contraction is there.
Yeah.
And it was not all too long ago, actually, that in the middle of the night I realized, in the middle of the night I woke up, and for 45 minutes straight I was laughing hysterically, because it was seen that even those instances where there is a contraction, or those instances where there's not a contraction, they're the same. They are made out of the same element, the only element that can be found, namely knowing, which is consciousness, which is God. And then the saying so resonated with me of Rumi, I believe it is, who said, I searched for God, found only myself. I searched for myself, found only God. And ever since, I have not detected any seeking energy, any energy that says that this moment isn't good enough. I just find myself the way I find myself. And that's not like in bliss all the time. No, it can take on any form. Although I am quite happy in daily life, but I can be pissed, I can be irritated, but that state isn't rejected. And then it's also so clear that what J. Krishnamurti said, do you want to know my secret? Like everyone's like listening. Yeah, I simply don't mind what happens. And I don't think many people got it, but it's really that.
So, when was the first moment in your life when you were aware of the spiritual impulse? And then at what point did you feel like, oh, I'm still in control, I can meditate, I can serve? And then when you don't have control anymore, and you were, oh, there is no control.
Yeah, so it's a funny thing, that's still, you go through phases. So I think this entire journey for me really started at a young age already, although I didn't know it. So there have been instances looking up to the stars as a young child that I realized, oh, there's only two things: energy and absence of energy. Which is actually later on I realized, like, there's Shakti and Shiva. And I remember a moment I was on holiday, and there was just a thunderstorm had passed by, and it was still raining, and the grass had been mown, and I was lying in a pool, and it was raining, and I was lying like this, and the drops were falling on my face, and it was like an ecstasy of beautiful smell, like the ozone, burnt air, the grass, the water, the sound, the warmth. And I think that's was my first Satori moment where I blended. There was just this beautiful dance. The eye fell away, or at least that I remember the first time. So of course I held on so long of the concept of I still was there as an individual who can do things. And after those first moments in the park where the center fell away, it started to dawn like there's absolutely no one here in control. And then I feel it was taken too far, because there's still this part that thinks it's separate, and now it starts to use that story of there is no one, I'm no one, I can't be touched, no. That's still playing on. So at a certain moment I realized it actually made me a bit depressed, that thought. And then at a certain moment I realized, well, just let it be my experience in the moments, in those instances when the self drops away, that is the case. And let it be my experience that when the self is there, or the center is there, that the idea is that something can be done. Just allow that, because it's again resisting. No, I shouldn't have this feeling of there's someone being there. So, and it was actually when I started allowing for that to be, that over time it actually dropped. And nowadays, it's funny. I often laugh so out of nowhere. I start laughing, or it sounds like it's out of nowhere, but then because there's thoughts, individual sounding thoughts, and it's just so funny that that pattern still plays on. So many misconceptions about liberation. Oh, many misconceptions I held for so many years, like as if it's an end-all solution to everything. Like, no, man, you've met all types of people where liberation occurred, I think, and their life can still be quite with a lot of turmoil. It's not all roses.
When you talked about that phase where after the Vipassana retreat, so I wonder, is Vipassana for everybody? And like after having that deep awareness of like, oh, okay, I'm witnessing, and that ability like to to make the distinction, I'm not that voice, this isn't necessarily true, to be able to discern that, like do you think that needs like almost like a period, like with you 1 year, like a prolonged period where you have to almost create space and time for all this to integrate? Or do you think it will just take care of itself, and maybe it'll take longer if you don't create the time for it?
First of all, no, it's not for everyone. I think as many seeming souls that there are as many paths. So I have a very analytical brain. So for me to really dive into questions of, am I this, am I that, you know, I loved it. I had this truth for knowing, for no no I had this longing for knowing, for truth, which was so all encompassing, which topped my desire for feeling good. You know, it's so normal that the main goal is to be happy, right? No, for me it was truth.
Mm.
And out of that, happiness will arise. That was clear to me, because I don't want to fool myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you fool yourself, at a certain moment, life will catch up. So for me, other paths, like for instance, bhakti yoga, devotional yoga, it wasn't my path. Now, it can be for some people. I experienced it sometimes spending time in Monte Sahaja with Muji. I loved his energy. I loved the way he spoke, and it resonated so much. The entire ashram is very much filled with bhakti energy. And you know what it does? It opens up your heart, and you feel love, and the heart chakra opens up, and it's just one beautiful merger of everyone's all happy. But then you go home. So it can become quite addictive, you know. And for some people it works. And I've noticed some people that just like they go home and then they work, and just like an intermediate period where they earn money so they can go back to that place of bhakti.
Mm.
That doesn't mean that it doesn't have enormous power and an enormous ability to change the level of consciousness of human beings. I'm absolutely sure of that. But it wasn't my path. My path was, I don't want any object that can distract me. No shiny things. Nothing that can, like, ooh, that's beautiful. You know, so interestingly, we talked, of course, that you also did this Kundalini facilitator training. The form we do is a very passive form, so we don't do any breath work, any visualization, any intention setting. It's just really surrendering. Back, it's already 20 years ago, I started doing qigong and neigong and breath work, and there it's a lot about visualization and making it flow in a certain way. And I got pretty good at it. Only the moments when I would lose my focus a bit, I would notice that that energy was like, it made me like absolutely sick. Like suddenly the body was like almost like vomiting. And I realized like, I shouldn't be playing with this kind of energy. It's so potent, it's so strong. It's like a kid playing with a gun. So I kept away from that. And when this yearning for liberation started, I decided no energy work, no psychedelics, no Kundalini, so, and also no Tantra. I had some experience with Tantra, which was beautiful and crazy and almost unimaginable. But I stayed away from it because I thought these are all kind of things that lure you in, that will make you feel good, that will give you those dopamine hits, but they won't give you liberation. So for me, it was a very, and then the Vipassana way is very simple, very clean. I actually found those retreats pretty boring. I did it twice. And even at those moments, I also thought like, oh, but if this is what liberation is, this emptiness, this cleanness. It's almost like a surgical a man in a white robe observing everything and writing down a report, you know? If this is life, if this is the ultimate, I don't want it. That was already. So I knew I also want to be able to dive back into life again. And I'm at a certain moment, the observing element became so natural for me that I was like, okay, now it's time to dive back in. I'm rooted to a certain extent that I won't lose myself, and I might lose myself a bit, and then I go back. And over time, the seeming twofold process, the duality there of observing and diving in, it just blended, and it was absence of the resistance there.
So that period where you were in the park, like, can you maybe describe what your routine was?
My routine was literally not doing anything. I would just observe everything. It was interesting to see. I learned so much about human behavior, seeing how people walk or run in the park, seeing where they hold tension, noticing how it also was relevant to me. I remember I used to always have like the back of my shoes at the end, the heels were always kind of worn off. So I kind of was walking on my heels like and I became aware of that, and in that year I noticed, because I was walking so many times, like, hey, I'm doing that, and I start to observe it and try to look into what is it that is causing that. And over time it fell away. It like after a few months it was gone. And then at a certain moment in the morning I was walking, and there was this lady walking up, and I said, good morning, and she was reacting in a bit of a kind of a schizophrenic way. She was like this, looking away, and it kind of like me. And then I walked on, and I heard shh, shh, shh. And I looked at my posture, and I was like, hey, I'm walking again like I did half a year ago, where my heels are touching the ground like that. And then I observed at my body posture, and it was almost like, maybe like you would see a kid that always gets picked last on the sports team, you know, a kind of defeated feel. So that reaction of that lady triggered me, and I got back into that old feeling, that old routine. So it was an interesting year where I observed everything, and I questioned everything, and I thought for so long. And yet this observing also, oh, there's thoughts again. And it was beautiful because literally in that year, the constant need to constantly be doing something, it just weakened and weakened and weakened. And of course, a lot of fearful thoughts would come up, like, how am I going to make enough money to pay rent? And I just got such a trust in life, because always last minute something would happen. Someone that would ask, like, hey, could you take a picture of me? I still work as a photographer. Or could you help me one day with an engineering problem? Or an insurance company would call. It's like, okay, you have this pension plan with us, but you haven't contributed for so many years. Do you want to buy it off? And then we'll give you a lump sum. So every time, last minute, I would be able to pay rent. And I actually remember one moment in the morning when I was walking, I think it was maybe like 8 o'clock in the morning, quite early, and there was this bench, and there were 3 guys sitting on it, and they were pretty drunk at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I was just, which I had for so many days there, just in total blissed out. I was just walking there and looking and say hi. And then one of those guys said, you must be fucking rich. And it was interesting. It's like, okay, that's his concept of only someone who's that rich could be that happy. He probably was more wealthy than me because I was working as an entrepreneur and I didn't work, so I didn't get any income from the government. Or he maybe meant it in a spiritual way, like I'm so rich.
Yeah. How did you balance that period with relationships and sexual urges maybe that were still there?
Yeah, it's interesting to see. So a lot of relationships fell away. So I just had a few friends who I also talked about this, and actually one friend from university time did for 3 years engineering and then decided, okay, I'm going to do a medical degree in another city. So we kind of didn't speak for a number of years. And then later on, we got back together, we met up again, and he had similar experiences like me. And during that year, it was bizarre. I would call, and he said, like, I had also this falling away of the center. So I was blessed to have 3 or 4 friends which were still close. We didn't meet all that much, but just to call every once in a while. And if you talk about urges for relationships or sexual longing, actually I always felt to not suppress anything. So I actually thought, okay, so those moments when the urge is there, I see this beautiful woman, I just want to walk up, you know? That's actually one of our biggest fears, right? As a man, to be rejected. Well, why not use this spiritual process for that? And it was only later on that I realized that a lot of Sufi masters had done, I don't know, in a similar way, but it's that they deliberately sought out moments where their ego could be hurt for them to completely observe and see what is happening there. So I made it my goal that if I would see a woman that my heart would open up for, I would have to walk up. Now, it didn't happen all that much. Maybe I'm very picky, but in that year, and also before that year that idea arose, it maybe happened like 20 times. And it's so interesting to see, because if there's already this awareness, this a little bit, to see already when you walk up, what it does to your system. Your heart rate goes up, or you tense up, or you start to speak and then the voice doesn't come out correctly, or you put on a different voice, a more heavy voice or something. All sorts of things, how the mind influences the system. And of course, very important, her reaction would be of no importance whatsoever, because anything was an opportunity to learn. If she was thrilled and excited, beautiful. If she was ignoring me or rude or saying, oh, sorry, I have a boyfriend, that would all lead to situations where I could observe, like, what is going on in this system. And it's beautiful. I could not almost distinguish the difference in beauty between being rejected or being approved of, because to dive into those feelings, to notice what is going on in this system, just to be able to experience that is beautiful.
Did you have periods where there was complete celibacy, or no masturbation, no release at all?
Oh yeah, this is like masturbation. I like even porn back. I think the last time I watched porn was with one girlfriend who wanted to watch it, and that is already maybe 12 years ago. and I think I haven't watched porn like 18 years old, but it's also because it just didn't interest me, because I could always see that maybe I'm very attuned to reading authenticity and reading what people really feel. And if there's a discrepancy between what they try to portray and what is, so that some actors are so amazing because they can really embody the emotion whilst acting out. But it always felt shitty to me looking at porn. So it didn't interest me. I mean, the first years of my studies, yes, but I think that was in the time when internet really came up, and we had like the fastest internet in the world in our technical university. So anyone you want to download it, you could have it like in an instant, which was unheard of back in those days. It was like 2001, 2002. But after a number of years, that's kind of completely dropped. Yeah, so the urge wasn't there anymore.
So besides those interactions with those women in the park, constantly your energy was just being, let's say, circulating in your body. It was never released.
Oh, like we're talking about the sexual energy?
Yeah, the sexual energy.
I did have some encounters. I had some girlfriends I would meet up with, but the like only a tenth of that desire was there during that year of what used to be there before. So for a number of years, I guess every person has that, or most guys, where you want to, part of your bucket list is to be with women, use women or men or whoever you long to be with, but at least to show that you are a viral guy.
Do you think there's value in conserving the energy, especially during your spiritual processes?
I think there's two elements to it. If it's like dogmatic, because it's good and I need to transform it, then please don't, because then it becomes clogged up energy. Better is to transmute it, because stagnant energy is always bad. It always creates illness. It's like water that's not flowing. So it's like, I have to retain this water. No, if you just allow it to flow, then it doesn't become a breeding ground for disease. So there's nothing wrong with ejaculating every once in a while. I just, when things like masturbation have become a habit, yeah, then look into it, because again, this is like the dopamine hit that you need, because there's something wrong in this moment. So there's something to be said for, because I hear that there's really almost like an epidemic around amongst young men, especially around masturbation, or an addiction to porn. And I guess that's my love for truth. I don't want to fake. I don't want to create a fake state of happiness by doing something, whether it's masturbation, whether it's looking at my phone, whether it's doing drugs. Because it's not sustainable. I want a base layer which can't be touched. So you have to clean anything. So at least that's a path I took. Clean, because then you see that your true nature is Satchitananda, is knowing being bliss.
So do you think that this is because of your character, or this is the spiritual impulse that was leading you, or something else?
Yeah, there's just everyone has their own path to follow. For me, this configuration just had this enormous longing for truth.
Yeah.
Truth and wisdom. It's like, if end of my life I could only long for one thing, that's what I want.
Did you ever feel a spiritual impulse and you were like, oh, I'm being guided, almost like
at a young age or nowadays?
whenever?
Yeah, so I've always, I don't know always, but at least from a young age, I've always felt energy here. And I never knew what it was. I used to call it dancing of air. But I knew that it wasn't something that other people had or that they were aware of. Nowadays I do mediumship training, and people tell me like it's the spirits that are guiding you and trying to tell you something. In Kundalini sessions, I always have it very strong. Nowadays it's almost constant that I feel like almost like a beam there or something. And I've become very aware of all sensations throughout my system and around my system. But it's like a language you have to learn over time. So I think we are all guided like this. We're just not aware of it. Say, sometimes suddenly a thought comes up. And you say, oh, I'm thinking about this. Really? Who says you came up with it? Was there a little you inside a control room saying, well, I'm going to think this now? And even if that is the case, who decides that that little person wants you to think that? So this entire concept of being in control, having thoughts, or even if you want to step out of it and then take it a little bit wider, being guided by, it is all one dance of life. And there is no separation. Even those entities or spirits or whatever you feel like a medium, in this mediumship training that I do, of course, I meet a lot of mediums, and I've always had this idea that there's something there for me for many years, even from a young age. But there it's still very dualistic. Like, oh, this entity is helping me now with this. And I understand it, but similarly as we are talking now, it is clear that life is happening. You could say God is talking to God. God is expressing itself in this way with a camera and a screen and a supposing other. Similarly, spirits supposedly help me come like this and assist me during Kundalini or during coaching or during my photography.
Yeah. Did people, like, especially during the park period, ever tell you that something was wrong with you?
Oh, I think I even thought it every once in a while. Yeah. But I was so happy I couldn't care less. Because I couldn't find simply, and nowadays still, it's hard for me to find anyone who is more content with life. So yeah, even if the thought would come up, have I gone crazy? I don't care. I remember I talked about like that I could stare at a leaf and I had tears running, like, oh, of the beauty. And then I would see someone walk up in a corner of my eye, and then I would react to that. It's like, okay, I don't want people to see me like this, because literally, if people see me like this a few times, I'm gonna get detained and put in a straitjacket. I'm pretty sure, because come on, a guy's looking at a leaf and he's crying of the beauty. This guy's dysfunctional. We need to pump some medicine into him so it becomes normal functioning. part of society. So yeah.
So what is the process of embodiment and the flowering of your realizations right now? What's it been like right now?
Do you mean how the integration starts, or after it seemingly falls away, the seeking?
Yeah, so let's say you're in the third phase and there are all these realizations and you have all these impulses and everything's just happening. Do you then like notice like that there's a certain integrity that gets embodied, or a certain kind of, let's say, not conditioned character, but realized character?
And who do you mean with they?
No, I'm talking about you.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so sometimes the audio is a little bit off.
Oh, sorry.
So your question is how life is now when unfolding as the clarity is there?
Yes, so when you're at the third stage, and you have all these realizations and insights,
Yeah.
and you also know how you've been before, and how has the process of the flowering and the embodiment of those realizations been now? Like how has that process been like? Because you can know, oh yeah, God, this and that, but you can still act like a jerk or have certain contracted reactions or certain cyclical loops and patterns or certain things you're avoiding.
Definitely. So that still occurs a lot in that third stage. And I'm not talking about anyone in particular, or I don't know the specifics of any person, but you've heard a lot, of course, in the past of so-called gurus, and then they come out with a sexual scandal. Or some gurus who are actually quite nasty and rude. So still that process, still the conditioning is there. However, the conditioning, unlike before, isn't resisted by a seeming individual that says, no, this isn't good enough. So actually, I've also noticed when the last seeking energy dropped that some elements I apparently had been suppressing because I felt it wasn't supposed to be like that or isn't spiritual enough. One of the things was talking out loud. I always felt like when you talk out loud, well, that's clearly the ego talking. No, it's not. So it's funny to see that I return every once in a while. I notice, hey, I'm talking out loud now, a little bit mumbling or something. So the absence of resistance to whatever state arises over time most likely will diminish anything which isn't in line with a cleaned up system, so to speak. But there's no guarantee. I mean, Nisargadatta Maharaj smoked until he died, like a lot. I know another Dutch teacher who still keeps on smoking. Liberation occurred, I think, already 15 years ago, and he's like, I just find myself smoking all the time. So when that judgment of good or bad falls away, the chances I feel that the system gets aligned are much higher, but there is no guarantee.
Yeah.
And relationships are something that are very integral to our entire lives and are so intermingled with our conditioning and probably also in our DNA and different generations. So it's definitely not that once liberation occurs that suddenly everything goes perfectly smooth. Like, hell no. A lot of my friends where self-realization occurred find themselves still in difficult situations socially. But the absence of resistance, so even maybe every once in a while I would swear.
Mhm.
And it's funny to see that it's often like almost like a burp, like something, like things that kind of irritate me is like you have sometimes a websites or online programs, and you do everything and then suddenly it crashes or something, or it doesn't fill in, and there's like,
Mm.
but it's almost like a burp, and then the energy is also released again, so it isn't held on to.
Mhm.
And it's like, huh, like almost you heard like a sound in the background, it's like, huh, okay, and that was it.
Mhm. Do, do you always feel like you're in the flow, or do you also have moments where you feel like you're definitely not in the flow?
Yeah, I think you could say I'm not in the flow sometimes. Sometimes it's just more stagnant, but more slow and not going the way you want it, and then fine. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, Apparently that it's not happening now.
yeah. So what is life calling forth in you?
Oh, there's this. It almost feels like a second life has started, where I'm just like this curious little kid,
Hmm.
and I'm just. I feel like the sky's the limit. So let's try this. I mean, of course, also about the pranic living uh, that I'm transitioning to. Um, Things like mediumship training, channeling. I find this fun. Let's dive into this.
Mm,
Beautiful.
mm,
Let's see. And we live in such an interesting time. I mean, I'm so curious what this beautiful play, how this beautiful play will unfold.
mm. So if you look back at your journey, do you think there were like steps that you could have taken for a more graceful or smoothful transition or experience?
Yeah, I don't know, maybe, but who would be making them? And if they were made, every so you might want to. If I rephrase it, do you have regrets?
No, no, not regrets, because that would make it a very like, oh, shouldn't have done that. More like, oh, maybe here, if I took this move instead of that, maybe the transition could have been smoother.
Maybe, but I just love how it went, and how it still goes.
Mm,
The There was like 3 years ago, um, at a certain moment, something came up in the system. I was doing some breath work, and I suddenly felt a sadness, and I was thinking about the girl I was with at the moment when I realized I had ticked off all the boxes, but I wasn't happy, and I broke up, and the relationship. We ended the relationship and moved out, and I felt, huh, the way I broke up with her, that wasn't the way I would love to have done it. It was too abrupt, too harsh.
mm.
So I contacted her, and we hadn't spoken in all those years. And we went for a walk, and it was beautiful to express to her how how I would have liked it to have gone.
It's interesting, right? When something happens and you have a point of view or a realization, like, oh, without the emotion or with this kind of state that I'm in right now, kind of feels or seems different. And it's like, yeah, looking back, I could have done it from the heart. I could go into this yin yang balance, with the masculine energy or the feminine energy. Could have done it from a peaceful state. You can approach it from so many different,
Angles,
uh,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and at the same time, the way it was approached was the way that was needed, because
yeah.
everything perfectly unfolds the way it should be. And even that what we think, okay, this is inhibiting me from spiritual growth. No, this is exactly what you need until you realize that you don't need it anymore. I mean, it would be boring if anything you would want, you could just, and then you have it.
Do you think that there are still some undeveloped latencies or capacities in your system that, like, okay, everything is ongoing, everything is flowing, but there are still things that can reach their full peak or potential?
Oh, definitely. No, I'm absolutely sure, convinced that we are only like, what's the right words? Expressing a small portion of what is possible. I just got back from Egypt. I mean, how those buildings, those pyramids, those temples were built, we know nothing. We know nothing. I mean, we're talking about bricks that are weighing 20 tons, and they hoisted that with rope and wooden scaffolding. Like hell they didn't. And then aligned to the stars, like, no. Before there were intelligence, either humans or other creatures, that were able to do that. And that means that it's also in our potential. So it's fun to experience this beautiful play where we're a seeming individual, seeming human, and that we're able to become better at certain skills and experiment. And I'm absolutely convinced that this life, that is the second part of my life, so to speak, is focused on these beautiful things.
If you look around at people that you know or that are around you, like, what do you think is the biggest downfall of people? Or what are they like struggling with the most?
They take themselves to be their vexed thoughts. That is, if that is a given for you, yeah, I'm these thoughts, then you're lost. If there's not just a little bit of distance, a little bit of awareness, similarly with feelings, you know, if that is your absolute conviction, and not just mental, but you embody that, then hell occurs, and that's just what hell on earth is. And heaven on earth is where that is let go of.
So what do those people need to reach for or stop avoiding?
Nothing is needed, because that is part of the play. Their inevitable suffering is similar to the inevitable suffering that this seeming character has gone through for many decades, until something in it felt the desire to liberate itself from it. You know, you can't force a flower to grow faster and open up the petals.
Yeah. Can you say something about manifestation, law of attraction, creating abundance, and your own relationship with abundance, maybe?
Sure, yeah. So in that year in the park, I have so many bizarre stories of synchronicities that are like almost impossible to believe. So I have an engineering background, but it's a design engineering. So I used to work as a freelancer, and I also made design lamps. And I sold those. And I got in contact with one guy who had one lamp, which just by royalties alone, he sold it through a Dutch company. He could live off those royalties, so he didn't have to do anything. And he was into spirituality and things like that. So we got in contact every once in a while. We weren't like really good friends, but we knew each other. And at a certain moment when I was in the park, he called me up. He said, Marnix, you know this lamp I have? Yeah, of course, yeah. Well, I'm now in Portugal. I'm in a meditation retreat, yoga retreat. I got called by my design label, and my design label said, well, we have a problem. There's a copy of your lamp, and it's being flooded on the European market for a fraction of the price. It comes from China somewhere, but we have no idea who's producing it. And actually, if we want to fight it, we don't have the capital. So we're actually screwed. So the conclusion was, you've been living off free checks now for the last couple of years. That's going to stop probably next month. So he got into fight or flight, of course. But every time he went into meditation during that meditation retreat, the only thing he heard was, call marnix, call marnix, call marnix. So I said, apparently I have to call you. Do you know something? I said, no. But I have a friend from my studies who's a bit more of a real established designer than I am. So I can give you his number. I'll check first if it's okay. So this other friend said, it's fine. Yeah, so give me his number. So I give this number to my friend in Portugal in this retreat. That guy in Portugal calls that other friend. Where is that friend at that moment? And mind you, this other friend from my studies, I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. I didn't know what his life was, but I just saw every once in a while that he had some nice designs. One wild guess where that guy was at the moment that friend in Portugal called. He was in China having lunch with the owner of the factory who was copying his lamp at that instant. So this friend in Portugal calls me again, and he goes really to fight or flight. Okay, I don't know how this happened. It's bizarre, this synchronicity, but I need to fight this. It's like, no, man. The fact that this goes like this means you need to trust. You need to call up this factory owner and start talking to him. And so he did. And this factory owner was a very warm, relaxed guy who said, well, it's bizarre. We got this design from someone from Poland. And we didn't know it was copied. We didn't know you have rights to it. So we're transferring it to your name. And now for a number of years, he made 3 times as much through that design label. Because he trusted it. He didn't fight it. So that's one of the one of a number of bizarre synchronicities that kept on going. When we talk about manifestation, it's funny because I used to listen to The Secret and Abraham Hicks. And I still actually find it funny to listen to Abraham Hicks. I went a number of years ago to one of their meetings, and the energy in those rooms, it's crazy. I feel the same energy during mediumship training. When I feel spirit connecting, it's like, whoa, I walk into a room and there's like, I mean, it's really big events, like 2,000 people or something. And it's in like an industrial event. So it's far from a temple kind of location, but I feel like all this similar energy, but like very strong. So when I listen to her, I know that truth on every level is being communicated. Energy is being transmitted, but she speaks to everyone at their own level, as a good spiritual teacher should also do. So when they talk about you being, when you start, it's a lot about, okay, conscious attention, what is the contrast? Okay, you don't want this, good. Now, it's important that you don't stay in that vibration, so you kind of tone it down. So you don't say, I hate my current car. It's like, oh, my car gets me where I am. It's not that bad. I see a beautiful car there. Oh, that would be nice too. So slowly you get yourself into, okay, I want the Tesla or whatever. And then you experience it as if it's already manifested. Now, this is all true. But if you zoom out and you read between the lines, it's so interesting. She connects to the people on the level where they're at. Those people believe themselves to be separate entities who can do things. So she speaks in that line and then guides them to a place which is actually beyond the person. And that's where true manifestation occurs, which isn't really manifestation, it's simply allowing life to flow in whichever way it wants. And that brings me back to what I said earlier, where I hear laughter when I have this idea of I want to achieve this, where the laughter says, like, really, come on, you want this petty little thing? Life can give you like 10 times much more, but you just your even your wishes and desires, they come forth from the mind, which is conditioning, which is a reactivity to your pains and your unresolved issues. If you really open up, inspiration will flow, which comes beyond the pains and the limitations, come from beyond the pains and limitations. So things more beautiful, more alive, more crazy, beyond your expectations will arise. So that's how I see it, and I find it beautiful, because as the saying goes, to be in the world but not of the world. Some people who just stay in the observer world are just in the not of the world, and I understand it, because the world has done so much pain to us, so it's a safe haven. But the beauty for me is from there diving back in and embracing everything, embracing the fullness, the sweetness, the bitterness, the full gamut of expression of life.
What do you think if somebody who still has an egoic identification is going to be like, oh, okay, so through meditation, I can access altered state of consciousness where I'm flowing, where I'm allowing, and through visualization and manifestation meditations, I create images or things that I want to experience. So I'm gonna, meditate, create, and then I'm gonna go into allowance. Then I'm gonna write it out, have the experiences, be back here, and I'm like, okay, no, what have I learned from that? What do I want? What do I want? Okay, let's do that again. To do.
Yeah, it's a beautiful part of this play. I mean, I understand it. I understand it. Does it work? Well, no. But I mean, it's like looking at my little niece or nephew playing. I'm gonna say, if that's not real, your Lego isn't real. I'm not saying that. They're enjoying it. So what's wrong with enjoying it? And you say, well, we're not going to achieve what you think you want. Well, you're not. That's actually the basis of everything. Your longing for achievement is coming forth from your resistance to what is. Once you are able to let go of this constant fighting of how life seems to be appearing to you, then life just becomes a beautiful play.
So, there's this image that comes up. It's like, as long as the person is still there, let's say there is the meat body, the meat suit, but inside there is like a psychosomatic or a psychological body that seems to exist there, right?
Contraction, yeah, you could say.
Yeah, from which there is relating to the body, relating to the people, to situations, and recreating itself, morphing itself, evolving, changing, upgrading, whatever, dying sometimes maybe. But if it would really die, if it would really disappear, there is no more that sense of I-ness anymore. There's just the spaciousness in which there is the the fresh, or the let's say the aliveness that is going here and going there and going there, but there is no more this sense of relating to I am like this and I'm not like that, and I don't want this and I don't want that. Like, do you think that most people have that insight suit and that really has to die completely before there can be this completeness, this wholeness inside?
Well, nothing has to happen, but the contraction itself is the opposite of a contraction by definition, a form by definition, a limitation by definition is by definition not everything. So whenever there's this contraction, you feel limited. You will be afraid because you feel you can die. You feel that you're not enough. That is inherent to that contraction, and that contraction becomes pissed off with the contraction and then says, this isn't good enough, this contraction. So I have to uncontract, not knowing that the contraction itself is the cause. So whether it's from a young age, we learn, okay, I need to get a good job and then money, and then I can buy this, and then I get the partner and whatever, and then I'll be happy. So all sorts of things that we search for in the outside world in order to achieve something, so we'll be happy. In other words, we're going to be in this resistant state all our lives until this one magical moment when, and then live happily ever after. It is that entire state that keeps it perpetuating until that falls away, and then still seemingly there can be a longing, but it is no longer. It is like wind blowing against a tree. Yeah. You say that the tree is resisting the wind. No, it's just happening. It's not like I must resist this wind. It doesn't work like that. Yeah. It's how life expresses itself.
Yeah. Can you say something about photography? Like, what is photography about, and how did your spirituality affect your photography?
Yes, so during studies, at my end of my studies, graduation, a good friend of mine asked me to talk about to take pictures of her wedding, and I have I always took some images, mostly like modeling portraits and everything, and I thought, like, oh, I'll try it, nice, and I absolutely loved it so much. It was more beautiful than actually my entire studies, I felt. But I thought, look, I'm going to be an engineer, and for 10 years straight, I still worked mostly on and off in China, optimizing factories. But every year I'd shoot one wedding, someone would call me. And I loved it so much because it was the perfect combination between creativity, technical elements, which I love, but also human and human connection, and of course, beautiful moments. It was at the end of that year in the park where I thought, like, hey, I want to try wedding photography full time. And then it really exploded in 1 year, really reaching a very high level and an international name for myself. And I take pictures. I have a very distinct style. People love it or they hate it, but if they don't like it, then they don't contact me, so that's fine. I shoot now 22 weddings per year. usually really big weddings. So a minimum 10 hours, but often like 18, 19, 20 hours or multiple day weddings.
Hmm.
And it's so beautiful because it's just one flow of capturing this coming together of two families out of love. And it really is a blessing. And I think it almost was like a reintegration process for me at the end of that year, because at the end of the year in the park, even though there were those moments where the contraction fell away and it was absolutely clear that there's no separation and there's no duality, I was so out of connecting with people because I was just here in this. So it felt like beautiful to dive back in, dive into life. And what more beautiful place is there than a day when there's expression of love, when there's people speeching, when there's people saying I do, and all friends and family together. And I find myself over the years that speeches, beautiful words, beautiful way people look at each other affect me more. And by affect, I mean the emotions are touching me more. Not so much that they take me over that I can't do my work, but before it was just a little bit more distant.
Hmm.
And I teach wedding photographers also how to improve in their work, and it's actually mostly similar to my non-duality coaching.
Yeah.
Don't know it.
Have you ever like been suicidal or like thought like, oh, you need help?
Well, I against depression, yes, not suicidal, but yeah. So the first few years of working, when I went to China a lot, I was working in the east of the Netherlands for a company, and yeah, it was really quite a dark period.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Can you talk about like pranic living and how it was before realization and how during and then after now? How
Mm.
it's yeah, how that
Yeah, so
process
it's
is
interesting because
integrated?
it's a process that kind of came together with the last dropping away of the resistance. Now, for me, of course, from first glimpse to that last resistance falling away, it was very gradual, very smooth. So for other people, like for instance, for Nargis, it's very fast, right? So it went from 1 year, I think, from first glimpse to liberation. But for me, I mean, I started with this 20 years ago and then grew into it. And maybe the last 10 years were quite intense, like really every day focusing on it. So the transition is quite smooth, and also a lot had already been cleaned up. So
Mm.
when I do now maybe a breathwork session, or I did Shoko Bliss, right, with psilocybin,
Mm.
there's like no dark stuff coming up, or a minimum. It's just laughing and laughing and laughing. So it's there's of course always things, shadows that's still there, and it's beautiful because then there's always something to become aware of. But the vast majority, the heaviness, has fallen away, and I think this process of transitioning to prana has also contributed a lot to the last ticks that were required, so to speak, to have the last seeking energy drop, because as it's said that once the process starts, every once in a while the cells renew to their ability to take on prana from the outside, and they let go of their old conditioning. And this old conditioning contains also not just the conditioning of needing food, but also other, you could say, karmic residue that's there. So stuff comes up, and there's a lot of, especially the first year, there's a lot of turmoil. Like I have this one particular example. I think I've shared it a few times, but it's so funny because I had this thing about when you meet up with people, or you have a like, okay, we meet at this time, and they don't show up, or they send you 1 minute before, although they need to travel for a half an hour, so they could have sent you like half hour earlier. Like, oh yeah, I'm leaving now. It's like, no. So this is probably something that pissed me off. And I had this need, especially when in the days when I was not eating longer periods, I had this desire to clean also the house. Just like there's cleansing going on on the inside, the need to clean the house. And I had put a lot of things on Facebook groups, like to pick up and on places to sell it for a low fee. And I had for one evening 4 people coming by in 2 hours or an hour and a half, and none of them showed up. And only one, after I sent multiple messages, said, oh, I thought it was more like, if I'm able to, I'll drop by. So I was like, but that was one of those clear moments, like everything comes together, and that what has to let go, or is being let go of, manifests itself in the outside world. And then in those instances, it's, are you able to observe it, know it, and allow for it to be without resistance, or are you automatically resisting? And if that is the case, then that's fine, but then it will be reprogrammed into the cell, and the karmic cycle goes on. I always make this, if you want to speak in these terms, kind of a joke, like life only has one goal, and that is to be experienced. And whenever you say, no, this isn't good, then life says, okay, that's fine. I have enough time. I'll store it, and you'll get it in one form or another back. So, yeah.
Do you have a relationship right now, or have you had relationships since your realization?
Yeah. Not in a relationship now, but I've been in a relationship. Yeah, but it is different. So it wasn't. It was also. It wasn't from the get-go, okay, this is the forever after, which is, I think, for many years, I always had this kind of idea of that's how it's so even supposed to start off, maybe not the first month, but afterwards, yes. Otherwise, let it go. So no, just a little bit of experience ever since, but it's funny to see how for many years I had this idea of the type of woman I would like to have next to me, and that I've actually let go of that a lot. And I have this complete trust that at a certain moment she's like, standing next to me is like, well, you look really good on my arm. Let's go together.
Nice. So on your path, which teachers or teachings have inspired you the most?
I remember Eckhart Tolle. When I love to listen to audiobooks, and I remember listening to The Power of Now, where he described what happened in the dark night of the soul. And I still remember where I was walking at that moment, and was like, I know what this guy's talking about. I know what he's talking about. So for many years, I just listened to his talks. I loved it. Alan Watts, beautiful. Osho also, but I thought it was mostly entertaining. And it was when I got in contact with Rupert Spira that I thought, oh, this guy is really in line with my analytical brain. It's not for many people. I mean, he's far too analytical for most people, but I loved it. It's like scientific process. Like, how can we decipher this? What is really going on? And for him, as he's said, is he never had enlightenment moments or awakening moments, glimpses like what I talked about, that the center just fell away. So when that started to happen, I was kind of getting like mixed feelings about him. It's like, has he experienced the same, or what? How does it go? But it just seems to be that for some people it just goes gradually. For him, it was like almost like putting a piece of ice in lukewarm water, and it just melting over time. And for me, it was like maybe similar, but then every once in a while, someone would come with an axe and like chop it up, and that's like, oh, okay. And now it's small pieces, and like those more chaotic moments in between. Whilst for someone, it might be that someone just comes with a slash hammer, and well, within a small period, everything is gone. So yeah, Rupert Spira, and then I'd say for the last, the last elements, the last straw that broke the camel's back, were really the die-hard non-duality teachers. It's like Jim Newman, Tony Parsons, which they although I knew what they were talking about, as I said, they pissed me off also, because actually those were moments where depression kind of felt coming back, because the ego that was still there got into this state of like, what's the use? I don't exist anyway, can't do anything. And then I realized, like, okay, well, embrace both. The moments when that center isn't there, it's clear that it isn't there. And when the moments when that center is still there, and there is still a belief in those thoughts or those sensations as being me, then fine, that is the case. And that's, I know it's always hard to speak of cause and effect, but at least there, a certain moment, it seemed to have melted away and not returned.
I wanted to ask you, do you still have time, or do you have to go? I have a couple more questions.
No, still have some time, yeah.
Okay, so do you still notice flaws in yourself or other people? And how do you reconcile with that part of you that will never get what it wants?
Of course, flaws. I mean, depends on what you find flaws, but far from perfect. But that's by definition, whenever there's a form, you create edges. So by definition, if you say it's A, it's not B, so it's limited. And if you say that flaws, well, then it should be everything, only that's of something that's everything, that doesn't have boundaries, that doesn't have limits, can be perfect. So by definition, a form means limitation, means, if you want to speak in terms of good and bad, flaws. However, that entire concept of good and bad, it's a bit funny to me, because how could we experience the good without ever experience the bad? Yeah, so when I did the psilocybin trip, when the last seeking energy fell away, I thought, like, I might as well try the psilocybin, because I didn't have this fear of losing myself anymore. And it was funny. I think I was laughing hysterically the entire time for hours and hours, and people there thought I was like gonna get a heart attack. I was like, no, fine. I was just keep on laughing. And nothing new was seen in that session. That, well, let's say nothing new was discovered, but it was shown in such a beautiful way. Do you know when you're like in a in a club at night, and you have one of those disco balls, and there's light hitting it, and with all the mist, it goes like all the lights, all the side. Well, it was similar to that, but then the light came from in the middle. I was seeing this vision where you have one beam, one center of light, and then all those beams, and every beam is a supposing individual like you and me. And some of those beams are able, they look at each other, it's like, oh my God, you're going really fast, like really good. Yeah, me too, man. You know, cheering each other on. I was like, oh, I don't like that beam. You know, these kind of things. And then some of them are able to look back and realize, oh my God, this is just one thing, that one element that expresses itself in all these things. And it would be like, but don't ruin the fun for the other beings, the other beings. And it was so nice to see, because I realized when you have a playing card deck, 52 playing card deck, regular cards, you have the Joker in it, right? So the Joker is not like the movie The Joker, but it's more like the guy that entertains the people in castles, you know, the king. So it does dancing and everything. And I realized, oh my God, that's why the Joker is in there. The Joker is able to be any card, right? It can be any card. It can choose to be the red card or the black card, ace, spades, clubs, hearts, any number. So that is the true meaning of this Joker. It can be good, it can be bad, and it dances in between the good and the bad in life. And I felt myself to be, in that instant, to be the Joker. And in one hand, I was holding the hand of the devil, and in the other hand, I was holding the hand of an angel. And we were dancing, the three of us together, because there's such a beautiful divine play. The Divine Comedy was played, where we need both sides of the story in order to appreciate the fullness, the richness of life.
So how do you reconcile with that part of you that will never get what it wants?
It's like looking at a play, a beautiful, a young child making a Lego castle, and then it breaks down, and it seems to weaken over time, and there's just laughter when I see it, but not in a, oh, that's so stupid laughter, but it's beautiful to see.
Do you know the model of Ken Wilber, when he says about you wake up, then you have to clean up, you have to grow up? Do you know that model?
No, I don't have Ken Wilber, no. But okay, wake up, clean up, grow up.
Grow up, and then it's like show up or something. Okay. And I wonder, do you notice that on certain parts you'll fully mature, or still some parts, life aspects maybe, or certain parts in your personality that there's still maturation to come?
Sure. Yeah. No, of course. So it's totally like I said before, liberation is not linked to the character being now grown up. I mean, that's actually the most interesting thing. Before you ask, like, okay, if you look at other people, what is the most important thing that's in the way of happiness? Well, I said the identification with their thoughts and their feelings. That is true, but if you want to look at it more like a psychological way, the vast majority of people might have grown up intellectually, but they're still emotional infants. So any emotion just takes them over, and they, unlike when they were 5 years old and they made a tantrum, they now come up with all sorts of logical reasons why this is justified, but it's still a so-called system that is reacting to an undesired emotion. It doesn't want emotion, so we need to react and do things. So here also, there's still things going on which are like immature, but you become aware of it more and more. But I don't think that might be also how this configuration works. It loves the analysis. It has this love for truth, the jnana yoga. So maybe for someone else, this isn't something they like to look into, although the concept of separation has dropped.
Yeah.
I find it fascinating. People are fascinating.
Yeah. Can you say something about the dying process and the relationship to death? Like, do you still have fear?
If a car goes at me at a fast pace, there's fear there, and I jump out of the way. I noticed 2 years ago, I always had fear of heights, and it was funny to see that at a certain moment I was at a place where normally I would like hold on tightly, that didn't come up, and I was like, that's weird. I was on a high building, and I was like holding the ledge, and I was with my head over the ledge, and it's like, that's weird. I could swear that all my life I was really afraid of this kind of thing. And then I was in Aruba, and I had the option to go skydiving. And I thought, let's try this. And I have the video that you can buy. And I was jumping out of that plane. I was not fearful at all. And you can also see it on my face. I was like amazed at the perspective. And I remember the only thought that came up was, this is something I've never seen before. And then the thought would come up, shouldn't I be afraid? Maybe, but this isn't something I have ever seen before. I was just amazed at the beauty. So, of course, there's things that fear me, but they're so little. Even if someone similarly asked, can you remember a few weeks ago, they asked, can you remember the last time you got really pissed off? I was like, yeah, I noticed it. It has happened, but I couldn't come up with the example, because just like I said, it's like a burp. It just comes up like, oh, there's anger there, and then I forget it again. So I still remember that there was, and probably I might come up later on this day like, oh yeah, I'm afraid of that, or fear arises in those instances. But
what do you like, if you look around, what do you respect, what do you value, and what do you want to embody?
Yeah. If someone asks like, what do you want in life, I love the simple saying of whatever God gives. What do I value? Well, yeah, I value authenticity. Yeah. No need to play. Playing in display, of course, is different, but I'm talking about living with a middleman. Living with, I'm doing this in order for you to get me this, and then I'll feel happy about myself, which is a way that I have been living for decades, and how most people live. They don't do things for the joy of it, but for what they'll get out of it, and they think once they get that, they'll be happy. And that's not authentic, because if I ask you a question like, what do you feel about this? And then you come up with an all complex story of what you think you should say in order for you to react in a way so you can feel good about yourself. That's not answering the question, how do you feel about this?
Do you think that a person who is still identified as an ego can be authentic or only have moments of authenticity?
I think if the more of the shadow work that's done, the more of unresolved issues are let go of,
Mm-hmm.
the more authentic people are. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's possible.
Yeah. So do you think there's like a gradation? 100% authentic, 75, 42?
Well, I think it might be possible that it's 100% authentic for some beings, but even here, and even with people I've seen where the self or the concept of self has fallen away many decades ago, they still have still certain patterns are there. So
Yeah.
can you get clean completely? I don't know. Actually, I don't care.
Can you say something about sexuality and how your relationship with lust transformed or evolved?
Yeah, lust isn't a problem anymore, but it just doesn't arise all that often.
Hmm.
um, no, so well, you might notice that also days when you don't eat for long periods, that it's different, right? There's less of a earthly sexual desire, but more of an connection on an energetic level. And depending on what kind of food you eat, it might become more animalistic.
Mm-hmm.
But even if that arises, then yeah, that's fine. I think it's actually funny every once in a while to experience that again, because it used to be. I mean, during your prime years of being in puberty, I mean, it probably was like vast majority of the time you had this kind of urge, and now it's just really scarcely. It's like, oh, that's actually funny to experience that again. Do I act upon it? I don't know. I haven't really, but might it happen? Yeah, sure. I don't know.
Have you found that after awakening or realization that the act of having sex, that the quality of that has shifted or been perceived different?
Because for me it was so gradual, I don't really notice all that much difference.
Yeah.
But it is so vastly different from when I was sexually active the first few years of my adult life, or around 17, 18, 19, 20, those years. That was, there's so much longing at that age, and I guess still for many people until an older age, of getting something, and mostly getting approval, a pat on the shoulder because you didn't get that cuddle from your dad or your mom. Actually, you want to hear I'm good enough because you feel you don't belong, you aren't good enough. And that's why a lot of games are always involved with these kind of relationships, because if you find someone that is able to push all the right buttons and you feel really good, if your default state is feeling bad, you're going to jump through all sorts of hoops to make sure that that person keeps on pushing those buttons. And at a certain moment, they won't. And then your so-called love turns into hate.
Mm. For me, I remember before like having any kind of energetic awakening or like moments of openness, it's like, if you have two dolls and let's say the feminine body or the woman, is like sensitive, and there are like certain energy sensitivities that are open, and when you're in interaction, this one is kind of like numb. Maybe there's one center or two center that are open or sensitive, and it's like trying to connect, but it's very, for this one, it's very like one-dimensional, two-dimensional. For this one, it's maybe like, you know, she wants this kind of flavor and that and this and that. And then after like awakening to the energy and then having the openness, the expansion, it's like, whoa, all these channels, whoa, connecting on an emotion level and intellectual level, on, you know, like going into the depth of sensations, of exploring movements, of exploring rhythms together, the tasting, the like the quality of giving or receiving. It's like, whoa, all this was here.
Yeah,
Because for
it
me,
goes,
yeah.
that is beautifully said. It's you, because you've been deprived of it almost all your life,
Yeah.
you kind of get overwhelmed by it, and it's really learning a new language, the language of your body, of what your emotions and your sensations and your feelings are telling you. Especially for a man, it's like really basic sentences learning. Like, I always make this joke because I'm also a breathwork facilitator. If a man comes up and I ask him the question, so what do you feel? And they're like, what do you mean? I don't know. You know, it's like, okay, the center is here. It's just thought. Then we can do some breath work and pump in enough air and do it, saying it a little bit in a simple way, that emotions come up and they're like, whoa, can I feel this? Like, whoa. So they realize, oh, there's a different element to life than just my thoughts, and I can become aware of it. And I love this joke they say about people, like the more northern you go, people are a bit more reserved. They don't talk much about their emotions. And there's this joke about people high up in Scandinavia, like Lapland, and if you that they're like a ketchup bottle, where if you ask about them, about emotions, they don't talk. But it's like trying to get the ketchup out of the bottle, there's nothing coming out, and then suddenly too much comes out. Well, it's similar to that, right? So we're not used to being able to connect on that level, to experience these kind of things, and then suddenly it's like, whoa. So it's learning to dance with it. And the more you are connected in the Shiva aspect, the masculine, the emptiness, which is a substratum for Shakti, for the feminine, for the form, for the way life wants to creatively express itself, the more you're able to stay in the Shiva aspect while playing with Shakti, the more beautiful this interaction will be. And of course, you will get lost in the Shakti aspect every once in a while. But actually, in interaction with a woman and a man, if just you want a tantric connection, you staying fully in the Shiva aspect and just looking at her in her eyes and being the emptiness in which you allow for her to express simply anything she wants to allow, is probably one of the most beautiful tantric, and then we're talking about tantra on a sexual level, exercises you can do, because what that awakens in the woman is something she's never experienced before, because you're giving her the undivided, unconditional attention, and you say, if you want to be angry, if you want to scream, if you want to love, if you want to dance, if you want to whatever, I am here for you.
But being realized, is that also like being in a Shiva state?
No. So Shiva is just
Oh.
one of the two. So I would say, if you talk about being the observer, that's more embodying Shiva. Once you dive in and do the tantric path, and now we're talking about tantra in the wider sense, then you're embodying Shakti again. Whilst, and then Shiva and Shakti merge, and that's the dance of Shiva and Shakti.
Yeah. And then it's like realization is being pure consciousness in which all that happens spontaneously and freely. The shift.
Yeah, but it's not really being. There's nothing being consciousness. Consciousness is. So it's clear that you don't have a life, but you are life.
Okay. Have you ever had an experience of God, or like, do you believe in a creator?
No, not in the sense that there's something outside this. No, but there can be states or things that haven't, and they definitely are, that this configuration hasn't been in touch with. Even when I do mediumship training, and sometimes things, seeming entities, get channeled through me. And there they would say that an entity is now, you open up, an entity can speak for you. But similarly to like what I'm saying, like it seems as if I'm now talking to Igor. Yeah, that seems from one level like that, but it's clear that this is just one expression of life, one dance. That channeling is that this configuration is open to that certain frequency, and that frequency now finds a seeming form through which it can express itself in a Shakti element.
Because you said mediumship, can you say something about mediumship? Like, how do you decide to get into that, and how does it unfold? Is there effort, or is it effortless? What part of it is enjoyable?
Well, I already from a young age, I felt a connection with this, probably because I had this feeling around my head, the dancing of air all the time, or often. And then I saw a Netflix series, and then I saw in that Netflix series some lady from the Netherlands, and I looked her up, and then I found out that weekend she had a retreat. So I simply went there, and from one thing led to another. And these kind of things go for me always like this. I see something, and then I Google, and then a few days later I find myself, oh, I'm now sitting 3 days in complete darkness, connecting to the spirit world. Okay. Similarly with how I met the guy who taught me to live off prana, although still transitioning. I think it's like 80-90% complete, but still eat every once in a while. And I drink water. I haven't let go of that yet.
So of the mediumship, like how does something like that unfold? Is it like the channeling becomes bigger? Is it like, do you use effort, or is it purely effortless? Like, and what do you enjoy about it?
Well, it's funny because the first time I went there, I was like, this medium, I learned it from, or no, that's not the right word, which introduced me to it. She had people flying from all over the world to that retreat, and I'm like, oh, she lives nearby. I just take the train and I'm there, and then I spent 3 days. So it's beautiful how quite blessed how these kind of things come on my path. So I told her, like, I have no experience whatsoever, like none. The only thing I have is I've been meditating for 20 years. And she said, well, that's actually pretty good, because people start with mediumship and then we say, start meditating for 20 years. And that will give you more results than trying to force it. So even in those first 3 days, I had a seeming other entity with a different voice speaking through me. And I thought it was interesting. And I thought, like, let's experiment with this. I don't know, it's fun. And nowadays, every few weeks, I go to an evening where we sit in the power. And it's funny to see, Igor, because when we talk about learning the language of your body, your system, the emotions, and these energies, that is really what I'm doing. I'm learning those energies, which I notice are all around me during the day and different moments. When I'm taking pictures, certain energy comes through. When I'm doing Kundalini, certain energy comes through. When I'm doing engineering work, when I'm walking in a park, when I'm interacting with people, different kind of energies seem to be around me and guide me or whatever. And it's literally becoming literate, from illiterate to literate in these energies, learning to speak, to first recognize and then communicate, and then learn how to tap into that specific energy when that is required.
Okay.
So similarly now, when for instance, when I do a satsang or I have a talk like this, I feel a certain energy coming up. Just before a Kundalini activation session, I feel a certain energy coming up, and I already know that the session is going to go through. Sometimes I do give them online, and because otherwise they wouldn't come through, and if we want to speak in those terms, that it's beyond time. So if it's needed, then it's going to come up.
So are you then are you also enjoying some part of it, or are you just doing it because you learn the overview of different parts of how it works and the mechanics
Oh,
of it?
I enjoy it a lot. It's fun.
Okay.
So I don't know. I'm still in the beginning phases, but it's so funny to see how I can now distinguish 4 different kinds of energies, and I haven't really given them a name, but I notice when those come through in daily life, and in those evenings I can connect with them individually, and then it has a different effect on the body. Certain movements come, for instance, the neck goes up like this, or I feel like it's being pulled from the heart or the plexus or something. My throat happens, or it starts boiling here very strong. So it's strengthening that connection, and it's quite an enjoyable process.
Okay. Do you have any future plans, or do you have like a big vision that you want to manifest in the world?
No, I just would love for people to connect with their true self more, because it would result in such a strong reduction of suffering.
So do you have like a setting that you want to create and facilitate for people to be able to do that in a certain setting, or?
Well, I give now these Kundalini awakening sessions, and I will also start to combine it with non-duality teachings, and maybe over time also with, I mean, pranic living is a bit extreme for people, but fasting can have interesting effects also. So I see myself slowly going into these kind of things. There's retreats coming up, and multiple day events. And next Saturday, I have, together with the person who I give these sessions with, on one location, a beautiful old church, we have 3 sessions with 50 people facilitating them. So yeah, no, it's beautiful to see how that goes.
Yeah. Are these things complementary, like non-duality teachings or like Kundalini energy sessions? Like, what is their reach, or what impact can they have alone or together?
True Kundalini awakening sessions can, the more the facilitator is in line with non-duality, the stronger the energy can flow. Because like the instrument is cleaned, you know, if it's clogged up with all sorts of dust, the sound doesn't sound pretty good. So the more clean the instrument is, the more clear and more strong environment can be set, so to speak, in which people are able to connect with the wisdom of their own system. So I always want to make sure that people don't think that I'm sending anything and that they're receiving anything, because that's really not the case. But if I speak to my teacher who teaches me mediumship, and I talk about this, she can see things. I don't see the entities, apart from sometimes I see some lights. She says, yeah, they're like anxiously waiting for the door to open up so they can start doing their thing. And the more it is cleaned, the more it is allowed to go through. So actually, in a sense, when you do a Kundalini activation session yourself, it's also a form of channeling, but just make sure that you don't start believing that you are giving something, because you're not.
And when you share a non-duality teaching, like, what is the impact, or how far-reaching is that? What does that do to somebody?
It's of course, the words is what seem to be what's happening, but also on an energetic level, it's a lot is occurring. So if you have a teacher who gives a satsang and it's just through words, it's not really a satsang, because it's really in the presence of truth, and that presence is expressed not just audibly. It is expressed in an energetic, wide variety. And you hear that also, that sometimes people don't even speak the language, but they feel the need to come back. Not that I've experienced this, but I've noticed this with teachers I used to visit like 10 years ago. Yeah.
I wonder if you with the energy sessions, if you activate somebody, like if you activate the shit out of somebody and they're active and their Kundalini is streaming, and then you open their mind up to non-duality teachings, and they start to get it, and they're in touch with their inner selves. I wonder, do you think that will speed up their awakening process, or give it like a quick start or a jolt, or not really?
Yeah, so I always see it not so much as I understand the question.
Yeah.
However, there's no cause and effect in that sense. If that longing comes up for me to combine those things, and it feels like that's coming up right now, then that is what will happen. And does that seemingly have an effect on accelerating the process? Maybe, or maybe not. And as a result of that, will I stop doing it if it doesn't seem to be like, maybe, who knows? And will I continue on doing it when it? So I just allow it for it to happen. And I would say not forgetting the body when you just do jnana yoga is very important. If you just only self-inquiry, only asking questions, that was really my thing. And I think for a long time it was so clear, but I always said, yeah, it's like my body is lagging behind. It's like a few years in the past. and that body has stored up all the memories and thoughts and unresolved issues. So something in the outside would trigger you, and then you're back in that thing, and then the thoughts would go in that direction again. So both elements need to be dealt with in a beautiful and a cautious way, in a loving way. So that's why I love combining it, and I think that's why the Kundalini sessions, because also it's such a passive way, so no forcing it, feels so in line with what's good for me, and that's, and I'm blessed to say that the sessions I give, I really get a lot of beautiful feedback from people who really open up. So I love combining this, and I'm curious to see where it will go.
Yeah, I had a friend last year who he heard about, he also listened to Eckhart Tolle, he was into non-duality, he was listening to Adyashanti, all these kind of things. And then I went to CAP sessions with him. In the beginning, he was just very, very, very still. And then as the sessions evolved, 5, 6, 7 sessions, he started to move a lot. He started to have like these experiences in the session. And then he was so frustrated because he was experiencing things, but my experience of my sessions was different because I also had visions and there were like these other things. And he was like frustrated. And I said to him, you know, just go to your heart and just say, if there is a God, I ask for his help now. And I remember he said that, and then he binged watched Tony Parsons and Jim Newman for like 1 or 2 days. And then all of a sudden he called me, and I just noticed from the way he was speaking, there was such a lightness, such like, oh, it's like nobody's speaking, or it's just like so like refreshing. And he was speaking, and I was like, what happened? And he's like, yeah, there was just the shift, and there was this clarity, and he was speaking. And I was like, whoa, like it was so beautiful to see his whole thing, you know, where he wants to experience, he has experiences, he's frustrated, and then he has like that those teachings, and then he has that moment of opening up. And then of course there were moments where there was contracting again and opening up again. But like I even went to a 5-MeO session with him. Do you know 5-MeO?
Is that
Alvarius?
Sorry, one more time.
It's Bufo alvarius. It's like it's venom of a toad, and when you smoke it,
oh, right.
basically you experience your ego dying. It's complete dissolution of the ego death. And literally, he smoked it, and in 1 minute he got up, he opened his eyes, said, "Okay, I'm done." And I was like, "What the fuck?" And in that moment, it just showed there was no resistance anymore with him. It was just, and you always hear about these stories, you know, when yogis, they take like these psychedelics or things, they don't experience anything. It just like, I was like, holy shit. And I smoked it, and I had so much, you know, release and fear and all these kind of things, and then released. But it's like, whoa, his openness is so different than my openness. Because when the openness was with me, I was like smiling and dancing and hugging everybody. I love you guys, and this, and he was just very, very, very chill, very quiet. I was like, huh, isn't this interesting?
Far more from the Shiva aspect from him and more from the Shakti aspect from you. So, yeah.
It is very, very interesting. Yeah. To have to know somebody and witness their journey. And now also I'm having people, and I just had a session today also, and I have this thing that I'm laying out, like, okay, if I do 4 or 5 sessions with them, after each session or before each session, I'm gonna do like I'm gradually gonna lean them in it. I'm gonna do a meditation, like a Muji the invitation, or like Tony Parsons doing the intro of non-duality. Like just drop little things here and there so that they have like these ideas while they're also having their activations. And this is like what I'm currently like exploring. So I'm really curious to see how maybe that can be then combined, and maybe in a retreat setting, like maybe call it the awakening or
Nice.
something like that.
Nice. I have to
Yeah. I'm done. Thank you so much for your time. It's
You're
really
welcome.
really nice to speak with you and to spend some more time with you, because last time I spoke a little bit with you and then I just saw you and Nargis dancing.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Good. Have a great day, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
Right. So even de recording uitzetten. Even kijken, hoe gaat de recording uit zonder dat ik het ding uitzet? Oh, ja. Wat?